Hi, I'm Dawn and this is where Shabby meets bling. Tonight I'm going to be using some inexpensive thrifted items and some scraps to create a piece that's one of a kind for my holiday decor.
You are watching Last Thing Thrifted, Creator's Choice. I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Jody from Jody at Southern Seasons, Annie from Crafting with Indiana Jones, Shelly from Repurposed My Way, Monica from Up All Night DIY, Marika from Marika's Creations, and Zaina from OK at Home DIY. You're going to find the links to their channels as well as this playlist in my description box below. When I'm out thrifting and I see Styrofoam, I pick it up because I use it all the time. I picked up these 2 cake rounds for $1 a piece. They're usually 15 to 20 bucks each. I also picked up these Styrofoam balls for 50 cents each. In today's project, I will also be using some leftover scrap pieces of foam from previous projects. With all that Styrofoam, this is what I'm going to make. I am going to make a big old gingerbread man. Well, I kind of got carried away when I was drawing out the first gingerbread man. He's too big. He's like a mango. Yeah, way too big. This guy would have me piecing together Styrofoam through the new year. So I decided to draw out a smaller version, a scaled down version of this guy, and here he is. This is what I drew out and cut out to become the template for our Styrofoam gingerbread man. I created my template by getting the Styrofoam piece that I'm going to use for his head and tracing it out on some brown paper. Then I drew out half of his body. After that, I cut out his head and the half of his body, folded the body over, and then I traced the other half onto the other side of the paper, if that makes sense to you. And then I could cut out the second half of his body. That way you have a completely symmetrical gingerbread form. You can do this with any template that you're working with. Now, you can see the folds in the paper. Those are there because he will be standing and I want him to have a stride. So his hands will be folded a little bit and his legs will be bent. Now, since this is the piece I traced for his head, this is the piece I have to use for his head, and it is way too thick. I want all my pieces to be 2 inches thick. So I'm using my carpenter square so it can set on the table, and I can line up my Styrofoam piece and mark off that 2-inch line all the way around the perimeter of this piece of Styrofoam. Then I am going to take my serrated knife and I am going to run it around those lines, connecting them and cutting them at the same time, not going in very deep, just making a perforated line, and then I will continue going deeper each time, cutting my Styrofoam at that 2-inch mark. Then I create a little beveled edge all the way around the perimeter of the top and the bottom with my knife, and then come back and sand it all smooth. Because if he's a gingerbread man, he is not going to be perfectly straight as far as edges go. There's not going to be any 90-degree angles. He's made of dough. He's gonna round off in the oven, so we have to make him look like he's rounded off in the oven. I am at this point just trimming up any little pieces that need to be gone because I do want him relatively smooth. A little more sanding, and then we start in on his little gingy body. The majority of his body will consist of this giant cake round. I am sad to say that I can't get his entire body on here, but hey, that's what the scraps are for, and so on. First things first, I need to cut this thing down so it's 2 inches thick too, because no one likes a cookie that's not uniform. I would not win a baking competition if this thing were kittywampus, so we need to mark out that 2-inch mark again, and we will cut it in half. Well, not in half, but we'll cut it so that one side is 2 inches thick. Now that I've achieved that 2-inch thickness, I will trace out part of my gingerbread man here. I am going to see if I can get the parts that are going to be whole, if that makes sense, on here, not the parts that will be bent. So I am just rearranging him as best I can, and then I am going to trace him out, and then I am going to cut him out. Once I have him cut out, then I need to figure out what scrap pieces I can use for the rest of his body. And I decide that I am going to use a part that I have cut off for the little part of his hand that's gonna bend right like that. I use my little template to trace that little piece of the arm, and then I cut that out, and then I form the angle so it will look like his little arm is bent. Now I'm moving on to a leg. I have stacked 3 pieces of styrofoam together, traced it out from my template, and now I will be cutting it out. I make sure from time to time that it is the right size. It is imperative it is identical to my template. If it is not, the proportions will be off and he will not stand. Next, I create his other leg and arm, then go back to the body to prepare it so I can assemble it. I will be shaving off the edges just like I did his little head and sanding it. I will trim it up using a knife, my sanding block, sandpaper, and my emery board. And now it's time to assemble. We need to put them together. I am using a heavy gauged wire. I am cutting off 2 lengths for his head and 2 lengths for each arm and leg. I will be straightening my wire first, because if you don't, it could poke through his face or his body, which I've had happen, and then you have repairs to make. So by straightening our wire, we avoid that. So I cut my 2 pieces, I straighten them out, and then I form them into just a little bit of a bend because I want his head to be looking down. I want him to look like he's really in motion, and I want him to be interactive with the items around him. So once I get my little wires bent the way they need to be, then I am going to glue them onto my Gingy. When I'm gluing styrofoam to styrofoam, I like to use hot glue. That seems to work the best for me. Some glues will melt your styrofoam, as will hot glue if it's not set at a low temperature. So I use my hot glue to adhere his head, his arms, and his legs to his body. Once he is totally assembled, we need to take a look at him. And as you can see, all his body parts are in place, but there are some major gaps that we need to fill, and I don't like that. We can't have him look like he was pieced together from a bunch of random styrofoam, even though he was. And I don't want him to look like Gingerstein. So our little gingerbread man needs to be filled. I am using some of my styrofoam pieces, little teeny tiny styrofoam pieces, and some lightweight spackling as a mixture to fill the large gaps. That way I don't have to try to carve and hot glue in some bigger wedges, which would be almost impossible to fill properly. I've used this mixture one time before, and I found it very successful when I was filling large gaps in styrofoam projects. I continue filling every seam and every gap until he is complete. Then I set him aside and let him dry. You can see how much better he looks now that he doesn't have those big old gaps. I am going to sand those areas that I just filled, being very careful not to create any new gouges or dents in his body. After that sanding, I seal all of his entire body. I seal all those pores with lightweight spackling. I don't want this thing totally smooth. Once again, I want him to look cookie-like. I just don't want him to look styrofoam-like. So I fill all the little areas with lightweight spackling and let it dry, and then he gets one final sanding. This sanding is the most important sanding because he needs to be prepped to get painted. So once again, I am using my sanding block, sanding paper and my emery board to get in those private areas that are delicate and need extra attention. And after he is totally sanded, we're gonna paint him. He's gonna get painted gingerbread color, yeah. In this state, he really reminds me of something. And if I were to paint him white, just bright white, he really would resemble that. So I want you to tell me in the comment box what you think he looks like right now. And I'm not gonna tell you. I want you to tell me. He's really cute though, really cute. Let's paint him. I am not mixing my gingerbread paint for this guy. I am using nutmeg plaid straight out of the bottle. So when you buy paint, whether it be a craft paint or a house paint, different lots come out different colors. Now I have noticed when I get nutmeg, sometimes it's darker, sometimes it is more of a brown color. And in this circumstance, it is more gingerbread color. So right out of the bottle, this guy is getting painted nutmeg all over his little tiny gingerbread body, all over. After this first coat is applied and he has sat and dried, he will get a second coat. Now, I'm not sure if he'll need a third coat or just touch up. We shall see. And if he does, I will do that as well. Then I will finish him off with matte Mod Podge and embellishments. As part of his embellishments, we are going to make gumdrop buttons. Gumdrop buttons! Yes, gumdrop buttons. I have made these before and they turn out really cute. I will leave the video links to the projects that I not only made the gumdrops, but use the gumdrops in my description box. I have cut off the bottom of my little styrofoam ball so it sits flat on my cutting board, and then I proceed to go all the way around the perimeter, trimming at an angle so it has a little gumdrop shape. Then I will take the styrofoam ball, now a gumdrop almost, and I will form it with my fingers because styrofoam is pliable to some degree and you can push on it and mold it any way you like. And I want them to be a little gumdrop. I will make 5 in total and use the 3 that are the closest together in size and shape. Before I paint, I am gluing a toothpick into each of my little gumdrop buttons. This will help me not only to hold it easier when I paint them, but it will give me more stability when I glue them into my gingerbread man. Now, to really make them look like gumdrops, I will be painting them and I will be sugaring them. And when I say sugar, what I really mean is sand. I'm using a white sand to emulate sugar. So first thing I do is I paint each and every one of my little gumdrops. This one is getting painted a plaid folk art matte French blue, and I will cover the entire thing. And then I will sprinkle it with sand. And it's quite amazing how sand truly does take on the appearance of sugar. I will paint my other 2 gumdrops in Waverly chalk paint. One will be sky pink and the other celery. After painted, they also get sugared. Next, I want to make some rickrack that looks like fondant. So I am going to take this pallet strapping, which is metal, and I am going to make a little tool. This is what I made. I am simply going to press it into my flour clay and create clay rickrack, which will look like fondant, and I will be using this on my little gingerbread man. I will also be using this on my next project. Once the entire little ribbon is pressed firmly into my clay, I pick it up and I put it right below that ribbon detail that I made, and I press it in again. That's going to give me the little rickrack effect. I make enough to go around his wrists and his ankles, and I make enough for that next project. Once I'm finished, I let it dry overnight. This is what it looks like once she's dried for right around 12 hours. I dust off all of the cornstarch And then I am going to sand it and trim it up wherever necessary to give me a clean looking rickrack. Once I have the rickrack looking the way I want, I paint it with chalk paint. This is a Snow White chalk paint by Plaid. This does take me a little bit of time because of all of those grooves, but I feel it's worth it in the end. It took me 2 coats on each of my pieces, and after it dries, I will be applying it with 3-in-1 glue on my gingerbread man. While I was playing with that clay, I created some little circles for eyes, some little pieces that are kind of angled for eyebrows, and I created some round circles for mouths, because I don't know which one, is going to turn out the best, so I make extra. That's just the way I roll. You never know. And I feel this one turned out the best, so I am giving it a sanding, and I am going to paint it sky pink. And yes, this is his little mouth. This is his little mouth. Once I get his little mouth painted sky pink, I move on to his eyebrows, which will be that French blue. So I'm repeating my colors to keep it all uniform and coordinated. And finally, I move on to his eyes. His eyes are going to be that cottage white chalk paint by Plaid. After 2 coats of paint on each of his little facial features, they also will get glued onto my gingerbread man with 3-in-1 glue. I found this little wagon that I believe used to hold blocks, because I think I had one of these when I was a kid. I picked it up while thrifting for 50 cents. I am going to make this into a charcuterie board, and my little gingerbread man is going to be pulling it. There really isn't a finish on this, so I just wipe it down really good, and then I proceed to paint the inside of my little wagon with that cottage white chalk paint. It actually ends up getting almost 3 coats because of the bleed through, but it finally covers well. I then paint the exterior of my little wagon that nutmeg so that it coordinates nicely with my gingerbread man. I am painting my wheels sky pink. I jumped into Canva to create this little sugar and spice bakery sign that will go on the inside of my wagon, and I will be adding, last but not least, my homemade rickrack to the exterior of my wagon.
It's time to take a look at my very last Christmas project for this year.
Here is my sugar and spice bakery wagon. It is also a charcuterie board. I coated the inside of it with a food-safe varnish, which is easy to do to make almost anything a charcuterie board. So this is a charcuterie wagon. How nice. You can see that image that I created on Canva. I think Canva is fun to play with. You can do almost anything with it. That image brings out all the little details that are in my wagon and in my gingerbread man. There's the rickrack made of fondant, clay, and the wheels are painted the same color as our little Gingy's mouth. There's the string that is being pulled by Gingy. Where is Gingy? There he is. And he doesn't look very happy about me making him pull that bakery wagon.
You're a monster.
No, Gingy, I'm not a monster, but you have to help me. I have a lot to do, and you are responsible for delivering the Christmas cookies this year. Let's take a look at him from a side view. You can see he truly is in the round. He is decorated all the way around, front, back, and sides. His rickrack goes around his ankles and all the way around his wrists. He is standing on his own. Nothing holding him up but his little Gingy body. There's a good look at his face and his gumdrop buttons. He loves his gumdrop buttons, as do I. I'm happy with his cookie texture. He no longer looks like a chunk of styrofoam, or let's just say many chunks of styrofoam. He truly is one of a kind. I couldn't duplicate this exactly if I tried. Thanks again to Jody, Annie, Shelley, Monica, Marika, and Zaina for joining me in Last Thing Thrifted Creator's Choice. You're going to find the links to their channels and this playlist in my description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, share it with your family, your friends, and anyone that likes DIYs, thrifting, repurposing, interior, holiday, and Christmas decor. You can follow me on Instagram, and don't forget to check out my shop on Etsy. Leave me a comment. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Ring the bell for notifications of all my upcoming videos. Subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. It is a fabulous way to support my channel. But for now, this is Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling. Thank you so much for watching and have a very, very Merry Christmas.